الإمام الغزالي رحمه الله ونفعنا به وبكم. وثالث البطل وحسبك أن مقصودك لبعده وأن تعام بذل العمل وماؤه منه يبدو وينبت وإذا خبث البذل لا يطيب الزرع. So this is the third so summarizing previous discussions, just giving very brief synopsis. The eye, the tongue, and then the stomach. So he says it's enough in regard to the stomach to know that what you're trying to achieve is ibadah. Remember, this is what the whole book is about, to become al-Abidin, Minhaj al-Abidin. And you know that the food and the drink that you take into your body is like the seed. Yeah? It's like the seed which the actions are going to come out of. So depending on the food and drink you take in, your actions will sort of grow from that as well. So if the seed is impure, then the harvest is not going to be pure. So it's to do with like the halal and the haram that we nourish our bodies from. بل فيه خطر أن يفسد عليك أرضك. If the seed is very bad, it may even destroy the earth itself that you're trying to cultivate. فلا تفلح أبدا. If that happens, then it will never be rectifiable. If it was really bad, the seeds that you're trying to plant. ومن ذلك ما بلغنا عن معروف الكرخي أنه قال إذا صمت فانظر على أي شيء تفطر. معروف الكرخي رحمه الله said, if you fast, look with what you are then breaking your fast. The importance of what you're taking into your body. وعند من تفطر وتعام من تأكل. Also who you are breaking the fast with, so to do with your company, and whose food you are eating. فكم من يأكل أكله فكم من يأكل أكله فينقلب قلبه عما كان عليه لا يعود إلى حاله أبدا. وكم من أكلة حرمت قيام ليلة ومن نظرة منعت قراءة سورة وإن العبد ليأكل فيحرم بها قيام سنة. So he says, the importance of all these things, what we're taking into our bodies, what we're doing with our other limbs, like what we're looking at, halal or haram, all of this affects our actions. So, you say, how many a person, he has just eaten something, without thinking about the halal and the haram of it. And because of that, his heart has been completely transformed from the good state it was in to a bad state. To the point where he never goes back to that original state that it was in. Yeah, and how many a morsel of food has prevented someone from praying at night. Yeah, the prayer of night, the night prayer, Qiyamul Layl, may be affected in two ways. If someone eats haram, they may not be given tawfiq to do good action. But if someone eats halal but eats excessively, they may be prevented from the night prayer due to being overfull, the belly being overfull. And how many a glance has prevented someone from reciting Quran? So you've looked at something haram or something you shouldn't be looking at, and you've maintained your gaze, Because obviously if it was just by a glance, and then you look away, that's excused. But if you then maintain the gaze upon something which is haram, this may lead to you then losing the tawfiq and blessing of other things like reciting Quran, for example. So often we may not realize the connection between these things, but everything's connected, you see. So end by saying sometimes a person, a slave, may eat something. Yeah, he may eat something which he's not supposed to eat, for example, and he may be denied 1 whole year of worship. So he doesn't get the tawfiq, because we can't accomplish anything except with tawfiq. That's why we have to be really careful. What we're eating, is it halal or haram? Where we're looking, is it halal or haram? What we're listening to, is it halal or haram? If we protect all of those things, then we are preparing ourselves to get tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فعليك أيها الرجل بالنظر الدقيق والاحتياط البالغ الشديد في قوتك. So, O person, Imam al-Ghazali says, O you person, it's incumbent upon you to look carefully and think carefully, and to be very cautious about whatever nourishment you take into your body. إن كانت لك عناية بقلبك, if you are truly concerned about the state of your heart. وهمة في عبادة ربك, and if you really do have an aspiration to become a true worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you don't have an aspiration to become a worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you don't have any concern about your own heart, then don't worry about all of these things. The big challenge today for people is to actually get them to have this concern. To actually get people to have this concern. The feature of the age we live in is people have no concern for this in the first place. Trying to become a sincere worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the furthest thing for people's minds. And for people to be concerned about the state of their own heart is the furthest thing for people's minds. So actually trying to get this concern into people is actually the big challenge. So that's why the job of those people who are engaged in da'wah, those people who have stand on the mimbars in the masjids and the Friday khutbahs, and those people who are engaged in this job of da'wah, that's their primary concern, is to actually get people from a state of being completely away from this idea in the first place, get them back to actually having this concern. That how do we actually fulfill our purpose in life, which is to become a sincere worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. The whole of mankind and jinn were created with nothing but this purpose. So it's the whole job of people who are giving da'wah, and for the imams and for the khatibs, is to get people to understand this once again. Yeah. For the people of da'wah and the khatibs and the imams to do this, first of all they have to themselves be people who have this concern. Otherwise there's no point. Yeah? Because as they say, the Arabs say, the state speaks louder than the tongue. Your state is going to speak louder than your tongue. ثم عليك الأدب فيه. So once you have taken precautions to make sure your food is halal and not haram, then he says you have to take the next step to have the correct adab of taking food and drink, which is not to be excessive. Not to be excessive. وإلا كنت حمالا للطعام مضيعا للأيام وقد علمنا يقينا بل رأينا عيانا أن العبادة لا تجيء منها شيء إذا امتلأ البطن. Once you've made that first step of taking only what is halal, then the next step is not to be excessive, because this will then prevent us from fulfilling our ibadat. Yeah? Just from the mere fact of just having a full belly and making one lazy. You know? And physiologically, like I mentioned last time, we know now that when one's belly is full of food, all of the blood becomes diverted towards the stomach. A lot of energy of the body becomes diverted to the stomach to digest the food. Digestion of food is a very active process that requires a lot of energy. So that's why people may have noticed after they eat, if they eat a full hearty meal, they'll feel tired afterwards, because all the energy is being diverted now to digesting the food. So Imam al-Ghazali says, we know with certainty, and then he says even stronger than that, even stronger than knowing with certainty, we have seen with, just, like they say, seeing is believing. Yeah. So he says, not just a knowledge of something we haven't seen, we've seen with certainty that true worship cannot be established when the bellies are full. So people, all of us, when we want to take that extra further step, we have to then accustom ourselves to not being always fully full our stomachs. And of course, fasting is one of the best ways, of doing this. Especially nowadays when Ramadan is in such long days. Yeah? That's one of the best training for the body. So we must use Ramadan as that period. We must don't misuse Ramadan by fasting and then really overeating afterwards. Now the days have become so long, it's probably difficult for people to do that. But when days used to be shorter, people used to abuse Ramadan and like spend the whole night eating and eating and eating, and then probably sleep half the day and so on. So then they miss out on that vital aspect of this training. But now the days have become so long, it's probably not even possible to, even if someone wanted to do that, they're still going to feel the fast, aren't they? So alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us that great blessing of Ramadan to, even despite ourselves, we are then obliged to go through this type of training, which is very beneficial to us. وإن أكرهت النفس على ذلك وجاهدت بضروب الحيل فلا يكون لتلك العبادة لذة ولا حلاوة. If someone doesn't accustom themselves to being hungry at times, then they will never taste the true pleasure of ibadah. And so this is only something that can come by experience, by tasting. ولذلك قيل لا تطمع بحلاوة في العبادة مع كثرة الأكل وأي نور في نفس بلا عبادة وفي عبادة بلا لذة ولا حلاوة. So that's why one of the people said, don't desire to have the pleasure of your ibadah as long as you are excessively eating. And what nur, what light is there in the nafs without ibadah, and what light is there in ibadah without the taste of the ibadah? ولهذا المعنى قال إبراهيم بن أدهم رحمه الله صحبت أكثر لرجال الله تعالى في جبل لبنان فكانوا يوصونني إذا رجعت إلى أبناء الدنيا فعظهم بأربع خصال. Ibrahim ibn Adham, one of the great scholars of Tasawwuf, he said that I accompanied the people of the mountains of Lebanon for some time, most of them. If you remember, Imam al-Ghazali has referred to these people several times in the book, that there were people that used to go and spend many years in remote places like mountains, where they would be very much focusing on trying to have the state of wara and taqwa and ibadah. So Ibrahim ibn Adham, he said, I spent time with most of them. I managed to accompany different of them. Why? To get obviously wisdom from them, get their good company, learn from them. And this is very important, that people keep company of different teachers, different sheikhs. He didn't just go to one of them and spend all his time with one of them. He went to all of them. Because why? Because then you take the best from each sheikh. You take the best from each teacher. This is one of the big pitfalls in our time, and probably has been in the past, that you notice many people become excessively attached to one particular sheikh, and this is very detrimental to them in terms of learning their deen. Because the nature of this deen is not confined to one man. It can never be confined to one man after the Prophet ﷺ. The deen is too vast, As the Prophet ﷺ said, one hadith we had a few weeks ago, don't try to encompass this deen, don't try to get this deen, because it will destroy you, it will overcome you. You won't overcome this deen. So the deen is too vast, Islam is too vast for any one man, and that's the beauty of it, that we have many people, scholars and sheikhs. So it's very important to go to different people. And this was always the sunnah of our early scholars. They would always go to the different teachers. They would go to different cities and find the best, the best teachers in each different disciplines. This is the best person in hadith, this is the best person in Quran, this is the best person in tasawwuf. Let me go and learn from them, And that makes sense. So he said, I went to most of them and they gave me this advice. They said to me, when you go back to the people of the dunya, because they knew he's not going to stay in the mountains, he's going to go back and do da'wah. They said, tell them to maintain these 4 characteristics. قُلْ لَهُمْ مَنْ يَكْثُرَ الْأَكَلْ لَا يَجِدْ لَذَّةَ الْعِبَادَةِ. Say to them, whoever eats too much, he will not find the pleasure of ibadah, of worship. وَمَنْ يَنَمْ كَثِيرًا لَا يَجِدْ فِي عُمْرِهِ بَرَكَةً. And whoever sleeps too much will not find blessing in his time. وَمَنْ طَلَبَ إِرْضَاءَ النَّاسِ فَلَا يَنْتَظِرْ رِضَاءَ اللَّهِ. Whoever seeks for people to be pleased with him, he should not wait for Allah to be pleased with him. In other words, if someone's occupation is that people should be pleased with him, should praise him, should say good things about him, then forget about the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because now you are committing shirk. This is shirk in its most subtle sense, not shirk in a blatant sense, of course. But it is shirk, because now you're associating, because ibadah means to worship, to obey, to serve. You're no longer now obeying and serving Allah, you're obeying these people, to get the acceptance of these people. This is why they said one of the highest level of iman, a sign of the person is at the highest level of wilayah, is that when praise and blame of people become equal to him. If people praise him, it has the same effect. If people blame him or put him down or say bad things about him in the society, it has the same effect on him. In other words, he no longer has any consideration for people because he sees them merely as the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and his only concern is what is his state in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is an extremely elevated level. But what we can do to test ourselves is, if we want to see if our iman is improving, is that we have less and less concern for what people say about us, and we have more concern what Allah thinks. So it's all grades, you know. At the lowest level of iman, you'll find people who are completely, their whole life is concerned only about what other people think and say about them. Their whole life becomes revolving around these issues. And that's how you will find the vast majority of human beings in that state. That their whole life is concerned about what other people think of them and say about them. Their neighbors, their friends, their relatives, their peers, you know. And it could even be people they don't know. So you find people walking around in the town, say for example dressed in certain ways or behaving in a certain way just because of what the general public are thinking about them or, you know, seeing of them. So even people they don't know. So it's all about, but that's the entire concern is about an image amongst other people or in society. This is the state of the vast majority of people who live their lives in this manner. As one becomes more focused towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and in purifying oneself and in focusing more on ibadah of what we're truly created for, those concerns will be less on that person. He will be less concerned about those things. And so it increases. The more one becomes concerned with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the more the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala impacts upon the person's heart, which is what we call ma'rifah, the less will be the concern for the creation. Because now the person is seeing with the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's seeing the reality of the creation, in that Allah is ultimately the only one that matters, and creation has no effect on you. So that is the progress on the spiritual path. So we can easily test ourselves by just checking how much are we concerned about other people around us. You know, our peers, our relatives, our business colleagues, our friends, brothers, sisters, etc. Yeah. The more we're concerned about what they think of us and say of us, the more we know that we're not then achieving those levels of ibadah that we want to. Yeah, this is the trap that most people also fall into. When they start doing ibadah, they're more concerned what people are going to say about them as well, still. Oh, that person now, he started becoming religious, or, you know, that person, he goes to the mosque now, or he's got a beard now, he's become a Sufi Sahib or something. So the person is still obsessed at that level about what other people are saying about him. He still hasn't made any progress, in the true sense. So it's about moving past that stage. It's moving away from creation to the Creator, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
ومن يكثر الكلام بفضول وغيبة فلا يخرج من الدنيا على دين الإسلام.
And the fourth thing, the one who excessively is speaking in fadul, meaning things which are of no concern. Not necessarily haram, but just things which are really of no concern. And then ghiba, also then delving into the haram by backbiting people. He will not leave this world on the deen of Islam. So very severe prohibition against the tongue.
وعن سهل رحمه الله أنه قال جماع الخير كله في هذه الخصال الأربعة. Sahel, he said, all good is in these four particular things that we've mentioned. Controlling one's stomach, controlling one's sleep, not being concerned about what people think of us, and controlling one's tongue.
You know, sleeping too much, in what context? Is that if you obviously stay late up at night to read Tahajjud, then there's going to be no doubt that you're going to sleep quite late till the early morning. Is it?
You know, I mean sleeping in terms of how many hours per 24 hours.
Okay.
So you know, people shouldn't sleep too much within 24 hours. I mean, Imam al-Ghazali in other places says 8 hours is maximum, like anyone should sleep in 24 hours. Because that's 1/3 of your life then.
Yeah.
You spend sleeping. So that's what it means, you know. So, yeah. وبها صارت الأبدال أبدالا إخماص البطون والصمت والاعتزال عن الخلق والسهر الليل. He says these are the four things why the people of Allah, the Abdal, they became the Abdal. He mentions Abdal because these are people that have been mentioned by many Sahaba in authentic narrations from several Sahaba. Imam al-Suyuti rahimahullah, the great muhaddith, he collected together all of the narrations concerning the Abdal from the early Salaf, including Sahaba and those after them, in one book, which you can buy. Like I have a copy at home. I can't remember the name of it, but it's got Abdal in the title anyway. It's by Suyuti, if anyone wants to search for it or anything. It's got Abdal, al-Abdal, and put as-Suyuti.
But it's in Arabic.
It's in Arabic, yeah. I don't think it's been translated yet. Small, you know, it's got all the narrations from like Sayyidina Ali, Sayyidina Umar, some of the great Sahaba in there that mention the Abdal. And what they mention in those narrations, that there's a certain number of Abdal, some narrations say 40, some say 60, that are always alive on the earth, and when one of them dies, Allah replaces him with another person of his rank. Now obviously there's discussion, do the Abdal know that they're Abdal or not? We don't know. You know, there's extensive discussion about that. Do they themselves know that they are from the Abdal? And for people who were coming to the tafsir class, you remember Imam Fakhruddin al-Razi had a massive long discussion about can a wali know that he's a wali? You know, so there's obviously different of opinion about that, and Fakhruddin al-Razi's opinion was no, he can't.
Is it Abdal and a wali the same thing?
Well, what you'd probably say is one of the Abdal, or the singular is Badal, is one of the category of wali, which from the awliya. You may be a wali but don't have to be a badal, if you see what I mean. You could be a wali but not
from the word Abdullah.
No, it's from the word from root badal. Badal means to change, just like in Urdu, you know, badal.
Yeah.
Same word in Urdu, it means to change. In other words, when one dies, it's changed for another one. That's the root of meaning of it. So that's a good book if people can get hold of it. Probably good to translate as well, if someone can translate it. So that's why Imam al-Ghazali in this book, he's keeping very much strictly to what is agreed upon. He's not going into sort of what some people have called speculative tasawwuf or Sufism. He's sticking very much to that which is agreed upon by all Muslims, from the Quran and Sunnah and so on. That's why he's mentioned Abdal here rather than anything else, because this is something very well established about the Abdal from the Sahaba. And of course the Sahaba don't get their knowledge except from the Prophet, if you see what I mean. So these are the four things that these people get to that rank of being one of the Abdal. Controlling their stomachs, keeping silent, staying away from creation, and staying awake during the nights. قال بعض العارفين الجوع رأس مالنا ومعناه أن ما يحصل لنا من فراغ وسلامة وعبادة وحلاوة وعلم ونافع. One of the Arifin, one of the people of Allah, the Gnostics, he said that hunger is our capital. And the meaning of it is that whatever we get, whatever, if you have capital, then you have profit. Whatever profits we get, in other words, it comes from keeping our stomachs empty. Why? Because this gives us faragh. If people are always occupied with what they're going to eat and then eating, they're actually going to waste a lot of time as well. So, just like Shaykh Akram Nadwi was saying in one of his talks, because we become very obsessed, like we want to have a proper dinner and have a dessert and whatever meal, and he says we don't need to be like this. If you come home, your wife hasn't made a dinner, just eat something, have a sandwich or have some, have something, bread or cheese or things like that. So it's about, then imagine how much time you'd save as well. If you just have something cooked to eat, Think about how much time we spend around meal times. Just around the whole thing, preparing and eating and then all of these things. So this is, all about time as well. If you have, then you give your time to better things. وَسَلَامَةً وَعِبَادَةً. Salama, being safe, safe from all of these harms that come through eating too much. Our worship, our halawa, the pleasure of the worship. Ilm, and nafi', getting knowledge. بسبب الجوع والصبر عليه سبحانه لله سبحانه وتعالى. والرابع القلب. The fourth thing, the heart itself. وأما القلب فحسبك أنه أصل الكل. As for the heart, it is enough for you to know that this is the root of all of these other things. Like the stomach, the eyes, the tongue, all of these things. Why we guard them is so that we're ultimately guarding the heart, aren't we? Yeah? Because when we're looking at haram, when we're talking haram, why it's damaging our heart? That is the actual thing. The heart is the thing that we're trying to protect. The heart is the thing we're trying to protect. You okay there, Ami? You don't want to come? You're more comfortable? Yeah, so the heart is the thing, ultimately, why we're protecting all of these other limbs is so that we can protect the heart, the qalb. This is the greatest gift that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, the qalb itself. Also known as the ruh, the soul. Why this is the greatest thing? Because this is the essence within us with which we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the essence within us with which we can know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Many of the Sufis often, they give the example of the heart like a mirror. Yeah? If the mirror is polished, and then it can reflect the divine lights, the divine attributes can be reflected upon that mirror when it's polished. If the mirror is rusty and dirty, then it will not reflect anything, and light will not penetrate that. Bal rana ala qulubihim. So these metaphors are taken from the Quran. Bal rana ala qulubihim. It is like rust upon their hearts. And you know that the Prophet ﷺ also gave that metaphor of the heart, that when someone does a bad action, a black spot appears on the heart. And if he continues with more and more bad actions, it becomes more and more black until finally it becomes completely enclosed. And no light can penetrate except with the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إن أفسدته فسد الكل وإن أصلحته صلح الكل. So then obviously this is straight from the hadith. He says, if you if the heart becomes corrupt, everything will become corrupt. And if the heart is sound, everything is sound, meaning all of the members of the body. إِذْ هُوَ الشَّجَرَةُ وَسَائِرُ الْأَعْضَاءِ أَغْصَانٌ. The heart is the trunk of the tree, and all of the limbs are just like the limbs of the tree. وَمِنَ الشَّجَرَةِ تَشْرَبُ الْأَغْصَانُ وَتَصْلُحُ وَتَفْسُدُ. All of the branches of the tree, they get their nourishment from the trunk of the tree. So if that is sound, then all of the branches of the tree will be sound. And if that is corrupted, all of the branches of the tree will be corrupted. وَإِنَّهُ الْمَلِكُ. This is the king. The heart is like the king. And all of our members of the body are like the armies, in other metaphors that Imam al-Ghazali gives. وَسَائِرُ الْأَعْضَاءِ تَبَعٌ وَأَرْكَانٌ. Yeah, so you have a king, or the leader, and all of the other people are the people who serve him. وَإِذَا صَلَحَ الْمَلِكُ صَلَحَتَ الرَّعِيَّةُ. If the king or the leader is rectified, all of the people under him will be rectified. وَإِذَا فَسَدَ فَسَدَتْ. If he is corrupt, they will become corrupt. So this is true of human nature. Human beings tend to follow us. They tend to be followers. They go with the crowd. Human beings are very much like sheep. And there's a wisdom why all of the prophets were shepherds. All prophets, mentioned in one hadith, that all prophets, they have spent some time looking after sheep. So there's obviously wisdom in that, and you see how sheep behave. They always follow the crowd. They want to, if they start running one way, the other ones will start following. This is what many human beings, by nature, human beings are of this nature. They just want to follow along what everyone's doing, and they somehow feel safe. Even if that whole crowd is going towards the fire, they will just be following, and they think they're safe because they're in with the crowd. So this is why the leaders are very important. If you have a righteous leader, it can have a massive effect on the people and below him. And if you have a corrupt, it can have a massive effect on those below him, because they're able to sort of set the direction of the crowd. They're able to direct the crowd, to some extent. فإذا صلاح العين واللسان والبطن وغيره دليل على صلاح القلب وعمرانه. So this is why when we see the limbs of the body, or the members of the body, the eye, the tongue, the stomach, etc., these are merely a reflection of the state of the heart. So this is why you can get an insight into the state of someone's heart, from the behavior of their members of their body. This is why one of the wisdoms why they say if you accompany someone on a journey, you will see the true state of that person. You can see the true state of that person, because when you're on a journey with someone, you're staying with them like around the clock. You see them in all different states. If you just meet someone for a few hours and that's your extent, then they may maintain a certain type of adab. Especially the brothers with, long beards and turbans and big jalabiyas, etc. Very nice, Assalamu alaikum, blah blah blah. You spend a day or two with them, then you may see another side of them. So that's something, it can be experienced. You suddenly see them their tongue becoming foul, etc. When they're put in different situations, because when you're journeying with someone, you'll see them in different situations. You may see them in stressful situations. The Prophet ﷺ actually said a journey is like a piece of the fire, being a traveller. Because it's not easy travelling, going to places. It's always like a hardship attached to it. Even today, when things have been made so easy, there's still hardship, because you leave your normal you live in normal residence where everything is in where you need it, and you have your things, set out, and you're going to different places. You don't have those conveniences around you, so it's still until today it can be difficult. So then you see people's states manifest in these situations. وإذا رأيت فيه خللا وفسادا فاعلم أن ذلك من خلل في القلب وفساد وقع ثم. If you see deficiencies and corruption in people's outward behavior, then you should know that this reflects a deficiency and corruption in the heart of the person. بل الفساد فيه أكثر. In fact, the state of the heart is probably worse than what is manifesting outwardly, because people try to keep a certain type of behavior, what's called adab. فاصرف عنايتك إليه فأصلحه يصلح الكل بمرة وتستريح. So put your full consideration into the state of your heart and rectify it, because if you do this, then everything else will be rectified and you will be able to relax. If you can rectify that, you don't have to worry about the rest of the members. Where you're looking. Are you looking at the haram? Are you doing this? Are you doing that with your hands, your ears, your stomach? Because you've rectified the root. If the root becomes rectified, everything will automatically flow from that point. ثم أمره دقيق عسير إذ هو مبني على الخواطر وهي ليست تحت يدك. And then going further into this theme of rectifying one's heart, he says, Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah, however, the matter is very difficult and very subtle of rectifying the heart. Why? Because it is built upon khawatir, thoughts, and these thoughts are not in your control. A matter of the heart is built upon khawatir, impulses and thoughts that come up, and they're not in our control. So you see so many people suffering because they have certain type of wasawis or thoughts that just go completely out of control, and they can't. So this can happen to anyone, and it can be from shaitan as well, trying to make things difficult for people. Often when you see people doing wudu, for example, they'll start doing wudu and they get very obsessed and they can't then move on from the wudu, so they can't get to the prayer. So it's like, Allahu Alim, it can be from shaitan just trying to make things very difficult, to make the person give up from the deed. So, the ulama have given guidance on these things, like which is certain du'as the person can do. And the key thing is to ignore those impulses and thoughts and to focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but not to try to resist or fight them. Because a lot of people make the mistake of trying to fight them, and that simply makes them more stronger. And it's quite interesting that now, when they have psychological therapies for obsessive thoughts, is very similar to what the ulama said many centuries ago. So if you have cognitive therapy for obsessive thoughts, they say the same thing to you. Don't try to resist or fight them, but just simply try to find distracting techniques, other things. So that's why he says the affair of the heart is difficult, because these khawatir are not in your control. والامتناء عن اتباعها مجهود طاقتك ففيه أقصى المشقة. So trying to then resist all of these thoughts and impulses all the time is going to take a lot of your energy and a lot of difficulty. ولهذا المعنى صار إصلاحه أشد على أهل الاجتهاد والاهتمام به أكثر عند ذوي البصائر. So this is why the people of ijtihad, the people who are struggling and striving in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to please Allah, this then becomes one of their greatest difficulties. Yeah? When they've gone through those initial stages of staying away from haram, taking in only what is halal, controlling the limbs of the body, the eyes, the ears, etc., the stomach, then becomes their greatest struggle becomes against the heart itself to keep that rectified. وعن أبي يزيد رحمه الله أنه قال عالجت قلبي 10 ولساني 10 ونفسي 10 فكان قلبي أصعب الثلاثة فهذه هذه. So Yazid rahimahullah, he said, I treated my heart for 10. Probably means there 10 years. I don't know if they've translated it as 10 years. And my tongue for 10 years, and my nafs, my lower desires for 10 years. And I found that the heart was the most difficult of the three. Any questions? ثم عليك بالاهتمام بالخصال الأربعة التي ذكرناها من الأمل والعجلة في الأمور والحسد والكبر، وإنما خصصنا هذه الأربعة من بين سائر الخصال في هذا الموضع وحضضنا على الاحتراس منها لأنها علل الخراء خاصة. So it says, when you have taken care of your members of your body, then take special consideration of these 4 things that we mentioned before, of having long hopes in the dunya, of being hasty in your affairs, trying to do everything quickly, trying to do things quickly, and of envy and of arrogance, the 4 things. So he says, I have specially mentioned these 4 amongst all other diseases of the heart in this place, meaning in this book, and I have really encouraged upon people to beware of these 4 things, because these are the weaknesses of the students of and scholars especially. These are the problems that come across students of knowledge and scholars especially. إذ هي تعتري سائر الناس عموما والقراء خصوصا فتكون أقبح وأشنع. These 4 diseases afflict all people, but they are especially the ones that afflict the scholars and the people who are striving to purify themselves. So these are the worst things. So very important, that he has condensed all of the disease of the heart, in over 90 as he mentioned before, into just these 4 core things to make it easier for us to just focus on what is the most important things to focus on. If he gave you 90 diseases and you're trying to, you wouldn't even be able to remember them, let alone fight them. He's giving you 4 to make things easy for us. Deal with these 4 things. I think it's amazing that al-ajala is there, especially in view of the time that we live in, where everything is speeded up and everything is all about speed. That he's put this as one of the core diseases or difficulties that the human being faces, that he's hasty. He's trying to do things quickly. And then obviously amal is having long hopes in the future, to think that your life is going to be so long, not to recognize that we could die tomorrow or today. And then obviously the 2 that you would expect are there as well, al-hasad wal-kibar, envy and arrogance. And why he's saying this here now, because obviously this book is aimed towards the people who want to become people of ibadah. This is not really a book for normal general public. Because, like I said, for general public, it's going to be a different type of book. It's going to be a book that's going to be encouraging them just to make tawbah and to turn back to Allah and to tell them about their purpose in life. Yeah, this is for those people who have made that particular step and now they want to, improve themselves, become sincere in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is why he's saying these particular diseases are very important for them to be really careful of. Because many, even scholars and sheikhs, have fallen into the trap of these particular diseases. Tara al-Rajul al-Qari, but the Qari and the Qura mean scholars, by the way. In early Islam, in the time of the Salaf, there was a name given to Shayukh, was Qura. This is from the Sahaba time. Because literally means the one who recites Quran. Yeah? Nowadays we use it slightly differently. People say Qari is someone who knows Quran, but like a Shaykh or an Alim is a scholar. But in the early Salaf period, Qura and Qari was used as same as Alim. يطول والأمل ويعده نية خير. So he says, how many a person you see like a big sheikh, he's got these long hopes in his life being so long, but he considers that he's a type of good niyyah. In other words, he's become tricked. Remember, this is one of the tricks. So the sheikh, he says, I want to do all of these things, but he's deluded himself into thinking, because he's thinking he wants to do good actions, but he's fallen into the same trap of thinking his life is going to extend more and more and more, forgotten that he could die today. So this is how Shaitan will trick students of knowledge and people of knowledge. فيوقعه في الكسل والتواني في العمل. So having these long hopes leads to being lazy and procrastination. Because if you think you're going to die today, you're going to not waste your time. But if you think you've got plenty of time to do all of these things, then you're going to waste your time. وتراه يستعجل في تحصيل منازل الخير وينقطع عنها أو في إجابة دعاء صالح فيحرم ذلك أو في الدعاء على أحد بسوء فيندم على ذلك كما ذكر عن نوح عليه السلام. So this person, this sheikh, you will see him wanting to have these positions in society, and being hasty for them. And you will see him that he wants his du'as to be answered quickly. This is one of the tricks of Shaitan. He's making du'a to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but he's hasty, he wants it quickly, the thing quickly. And not having the correct adab with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or you might see him making du'a against people, cursing or making du'a against other people, and then later he may regret having made that hastily, once again being hasty. As was mentioned about Nuh alayhi salam, he says. Sorry,
this is all because of long hopes?
This is to do with long hopes, yeah, and ajala as well. This is to do with ajala. Tarahu yasta'jil. So this is the second one. Yeah?
Oh.
To want things quickly. So this is to do with wanting things quickly. Not having the sabr to wait for things in their right time. So what do you think he's referring to when he says this is from Nuh alayhi salam?
Is it when he asked Allah for his son?
Kill all the people.
Because they only give birth to kuffar, isn't it?
Anyone got a commentary on that?
Shouldn't be about Nuh on this one.
I thought it's because of when he asked Allah for his son.
For his son, yeah, that's the other one. Yeah. What about you? Have you got any this?
إشارة إلى الآيات الكريمة في دعائه على قوم رب لا تذر على الأرض من الكافرين ديارا. إنك أنت
So
تراني.
they're taking the first one. Yeah.
What was the first one?
You know when Nuh alayhi salam, when he makes the du'as in the Quran, oh Allah, do not leave one single house of kafir left on this earth. So he says this has been narrated, but Allah alim if this is strong or not. You know, it's not in the Quran that he later was regretful about the dua, but Allah alim. I don't know. Maybe he was a bit hasty, Allah alim. But he was there for 950 years. Can't have been that hasty.
And in the Quran as well it says then yu'min. Allah told him that there is no.
Yeah, and even
Yes,
Allah
yeah,
says no one will believe.
There'll be
these
more.
people,
So
yeah.
بس ديارة من
They are from Dar, house,
House,
Dar, Dar, from house. Let not any house of these people remain upon the earth. So he made a dua against them. So this is Kama Dhukira, this has been mentioned, whether it's probably weak, Allah Alam.
Sorry, just to come to that point, we know that in Sahih Hadith and other Ravaya as well that the dua of the oppressed is answered, the dua of the wali is answered. And so when these people make dua for people that have suffered calamities or even suffered at the hands of oppressors, not naming any countries, but like in the Middle East, obviously we don't see any change at a human level, but then will they still see that dua in the form of a mountain in the hereafter or something?
Yeah, I mean, if you make du'as for yourself, if you make dua for yourself for things, and then you don't get them actually in this life, you would then see them in the hereafter.
And if you make du'as for others,
Then you would also see benefit, yeah, because every time you make dua for someone else, you also get the equivalent
okay.
for yourself. So you would also see it in that case as well.
Okay, so in one form or another, you'll see the benefit.
But it's also the case that there often be a time delay. The thing doesn't have time straight away.
It could be time delayed. There could be sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will prevent a different calamity. Yeah, that you don't even know about, that was going to afflict some people, and it was averted because of your dua, but you don't even know about it. So there's always benefit in making dua. It's never wasted, unless, for example, we're insincere or we're eating haram. Remember one hadith sahih, the person is eating haram, drinking haram, wearing haram, how can his dua be accepted? You know? So there are things that can prevent dua being accepted as well. But as long as we fulfill those conditions and we make dua, it's never wasted. It's never wasted.
I say that in context of the current financial crisis. The one sheikh was saying that it's sometimes these people are so arrogant. Their weakness is not from the perceived threat which they think is the military, but from where they least expect it. So financially, these guys didn't even have any consideration. But right now, they've started testing war scenarios based on the financial markets. So whether it's China buying too many bonds and flooding the market to destroy them, or even now with Youre on Friday, they were supposed to have an agreement signed, but it backfired. So the markets are so financially bad that could that possibly be someone's door also?
Who knows? Allah Alam, could be. We don't know how it's going to play out, so I don't want to say anything, you know. It's different, all sorts of different possibilities, you know. So don't want to go into that too much, but it could well be. But you know, the nature of the global economic financial system is such that there's always crises. You know, they come now and then, don't they? Could be in different regions. This is a particularly seems to be particularly very destabilizing global situation. But who knows? Allah Alam, how much of it is still within their control or out of their control, or how many people are actually making huge profits from the whole crisis at the moment. You know, like that guy that came on TV a few weeks ago, and there's a big hoo-ha. Some guy, he was a nobody really, but he'd sort of got onto the news saying, recession's brilliant, you know, because for people who are in the right places and got the right money, they can make a lot of money from these type of crises, and so it's very very unpredictable, I'd say. You know. There's some theories that the whole crisis is being used to some people's advantage. You know, there's other theories that the system needs to collapse.
Curses against these oppressors and that, and you'd think, man, if there's anyone's du'as, it would be someone like this person, or doing itikaf, you hear du'as from really pious people, and they're always against the oppressor, and we haven't seen any change, or arguably, I'm not saying it, but so there must be something that's going to happen.
See, we don't know. I mean, don't forget, you know, when the Prophet ﷺ, he said in that hadith about Yajuj wa Majuj, he came once to his wife Zainab bint Jahash. She narrated this in Sahih al-Bukhari, and it's narrated by multiple chains. This particular hadith is very strong. He came to her once fazi'an, in a state of fear, which is a very strong word to use for the Prophet ﷺ. You know, that he would be in a state of that faza', like it's almost like fear. And he said to her, La ilaha illallah, waylun lil Arab min sharrin qad iqtarab. He said, La ilaha illallah, woe to the Arabs from this evil that has come close. Today, a hole has been made, an opening has been made in the wall of Yajuj wa Majuj. And he made a symbol of his, like this, you know, to indicate that this breach has occurred. And then she said, would we be destroyed? This was the point. Would we be destroyed when there's good people amongst us? And he said, yes, إِذَا كَثُرَ الْخَبَث. When the bad, the impurity, khabath is like just impure, bad, evil. When that becomes very much, then you would be destroyed, even though there's righteous people amongst you. So that's the understanding, that's the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's in the Quran as well. That when the punishment of Allah comes, it doesn't just afflict, you know, certain parts of it, afflicts everyone. And then on Yawm al-Qiyamah, people are raised according to their states, you know. So sometimes the dua of these righteous people amongst us, they could be helping us, they could be keeping away the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon these people, we don't know. You know? Why people are not being destroyed already? For the amount of corruption, evil, you know, this horrible stuff that's happening. One of the sheikhs I was listening to a few weeks ago is saying the abuse of children that's taking place now in Western societies. A real, you know, sickening abuse of children is taking place. That just deserves the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to come down. You know what I mean? It's becoming so rife amongst this society. You know, sickening. So that's, you know, these people, maybe they're preventing the punishment of Allah coming down. We don't know. Or, you know, their du'as will be answered, because we know these people will be destroyed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know? وتراه يحسد نظائره على ما أتاهم الله من فضله حتى ربما يبلغ منه ذلك مبلغا يحمله على قبائحها وفضائحها لا يقدم عليها فاسق ولا فاجر. Now he's talking specifically now about sheikhs themselves, and these sheikhs that become corrupted within themselves. And you know, it's sad to say, you know, it's not nice to say these things, but of course it's important also to understand the time we live in. It's rife amongst us, our community, that our sheikhs are also not living up to the standards, you know. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us, you know. I just pray that Allah protects me from also falling into these same traps. I don't consider myself to be immune from it. You know, I just have to make dua that Allah protects all of us. But Imam al-Ghazali here is really pointing this out in a strong way, that you see many of these sheikhs full of hasad, full of envy towards their peers, And remember, the hasad of the shaykh will be towards other shaykhs. It won't be towards normal Muslim. And the envy of normal Muslim will be towards their peers. And the envy of aristocracy will be towards their other aristocracy. Everyone always has hasad towards their peers. That's the general rule of hasad.
Which is quite amazing as well. In the sense that if that wasn't the case, if we had envy for someone like the likes of Tiger Woods or something who's a billionaire, that would be false, because you would never be able to attain what he has. So you would give up. But if you were in the office and you're trying to aspire to someone who's a VP or a director, one grade above you, you can still waste your time. So shaitan deludes you. So it's quite profound that you have envy towards your peer group, which is something that your nafs says to you is achievable and attainable, yet you can still be sidetracked.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. So it can really become so destructive in that way, you know. So you can really, and hasad is something that can become so destructive, you know, when allowed to, you know, when someone doesn't quell it, it can become very destructive. It can, as they say in English, it consumes you. You know, envy consumes you. He's consumed with envy. It literally can. The Prophet said how it, you know, eats up your good actions like fire burning wood. So one thing, the idea of consuming away, you know, consuming someone. Very, very dangerous. So he says, you will see some these sheikhs full of this envy to the point where it can even lead them to do things that are so despicable that you wouldn't even see a fasiq or a fajir doing. In terms of backbiting, you know, even slandering other sheikhs. Backbiting or even saying things about the sheikhs that they shouldn't say. ولهذا المعنى قال سفيان الثوري ما أخاف على دمي إلا من القراء والعلماء فاستنكر منه ذلك. So Sufyan al-Thawri, one of the great of the early Salaf, the great master of hadith, yeah, he made this statement: I don't fear from my dam, my blood, and here meaning in the metaphorical sense because of the eating the flesh of your dead brother analogy from the Quran. I don't fear from my blood except from the Qur'an and the ulama, the shuyukh. فاستنكروا منه ذلك. The people around him, his students, they weren't happy with this statement, you know. They said, why, how can you say this, you know? فقال ما أنا قلته إنما قال إبراهيم النخعي. He said, this is not from me, this is from Ibrahim al-Nakhai, yeah, referring to one of his great scholars.
He was a student of Hazrat ibn Abdul Abdullah ibn Masud.
He's from the son of Abu Hanifa.
Yeah.
He wasn't a direct student, I don't think, of Abdullah ibn Masud, but through his teacher's teacher was Abdullah ibn Masud.
But it's Abdullah ibn Masud, then the teacher, then Imam Ibrahim Nakwi, and then Abu Hanifa.
No, then you have Hamad,
Yeah,
and then Abu Hanifa. Yeah, Ibrahim al-Nakhai is one of the great figures. Abu Hanifa, I mean, Shaykh Akram Nadwi, he's been looking very deeply into the early madhab, or Hanif madhab, and he said, if you look at Abu Hanifa's opinions, they're almost identical with Ibrahim al-Nakhai. Most of his fiqh is directly from Ibrahim al-Nakhai. So he's a great figure from the early Salaf. وعن عطاء قال لي الثوري احذروا القرى واحذروني معهم. Sufyan al-Thawri similarly said this amazing statement. He said to one of his companions, Ata, he said, beware of the scholars and beware of me as well, because he himself is a scholar. فلو خالفت what do you have in the Arabic there? ولا خالفت أودهم.
ودهم maybe?
What do you have in the translation?
Awaddu maybe?
It may be possible that I give a ruling of a pomegranate this week.
Sorry?
A pomegranate.
Say again the whole thing?
Beware of me and the devout persons. It is possible that I may at any time give a ruling about a pomegranate that is sweet, and another saying issues a ruling that it is sour. This may lead to a quarrel between us, ending in murder.
Yes.
أودهم.
What do you have?
أودهم.
وإذا خلفت أودهم لي يعني the more beloved to me من from ود أودهم لي.
في رمانة.
Yeah, so if someone's really liking me but I just was defer with him.
في رمانة فأقول إنها حلوة, but that doesn't fit in the context of it. So
Yeah, I've got the same translation as Khatim. It's beware of the Quran reciters and beware of me in their presence, for if I contradict the dearest of them to me,
the dearest of them,
by saying that pomegranate is sweet, when he says it is sour, I cannot be sure that he will not carry my blood to ruler.
So, then we disagree about this thing. Yeah, so once again, just giving a severe warning about sheikhs themselves between each other. And this is very clear for students of Islamic fiqh and Islamic knowledge. If you look at the early Salaf, the first 3 generations, and then you look at the later scholars, even great scholars, you see a quite difference in how they deal with each other. The early Salaf like Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi, Imam Malik, you see how much respect they have for each other. Despite having all of these ikhtilafat, how much respect they had and how they praise each other in reliable narration. And then you look a few generations later, even the great scholars of hadith and so on, they start becoming, towards the people that are against their opinions, they start becoming sometimes not having the correct adab. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive them and all of us. But you do see that in some of them. In some you don't. In some you still see that great adab and respect continuing. But in some, especially against Abu Hanifa, you'll find some of the later scholars, and some of them are great scholars, and Allah forgive them if they did have any bad intentions or ill feelings, but they made quite severe statements against Abu Hanifa, for example. And because the Hanafi madhab by that time had become huge, it had become taken on by the Abbasid and so on. So naturally, in a way, people who were from other madhabs were very strongly in debate with the Hanafis. So sometimes, it descended into things that shouldn't really have been, statements that shouldn't really have been used, and things like that. But you won't find that in the early generations. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, the best generation is mine, then the one that follows them, then the one that follows them. The first 3 generations have a special status within our deen. وعن مالك بن دينار أنه قال إني أقبل شهادة القراء على جميع الخلق ولا أقبل شهادة بعضهم على بعض لأني وجدتهم حسادا. Malik ibn Dinar, he said, I will accept the testimony of a sheikh upon anyone, but I won't accept the testimony of a sheikh against another sheikh, because I have found them to be people of envy. So you see Imam al-Ghazali is taking his gloves off here now. About these sheikhs. And that, of course, that was the beauty of Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah in the time when he came. He was a great reformer, a great corrector, a great mujaddid. So he was focusing on every different group within the society, and telling them this is where you're going wrong and this is what you need to sort out. The umara, the leaders, the followers, the different sects, the philosophers, the Shia, and the scholars as well.
In his book, Save You From Error, I don't know what it's translated like. It's a very concise book, and he really has got Ibn Sina. What would you think of a position that that knows the deen more and more versed than others, but then he quietly takes some alcohol on the pretext that it's for medicinal purposes, and he really rips it.
Yeah, so عن الفضيل لأنه قال لابنه اشتري دارا بعيدة من القرى. This is obviously very مبالغة, but ما لي ولقوم إن ظهرت مني زلة حسدوني وإن ظهرت علي نعمة حسدوني. Al-Fudayl, one of the scholars, said to his son, purchase for me a house far away from the other scholars, other sheikhs. He said, why would I want to stay around the people? If I make any tiny mistake, they will be criticizing me. And if I do something good, they will be envying me. This is serious. I mean, he's not just joking. Maybe he had, some people had afflicted him, other of his peers had made hasad towards him, etc. So that's why it's led him to make this statement, وكذلك تراه يتكبر على الناس ويستخف بهم مسعرا أخذه معبسا وجهه كأنما يمن على الناس بما يصلي زيادة ركعتين أو كأنما جاءه من الله تعالى منشور بالجنة والبراءة من النار أو كأنه استيقن سعادة لنفسه والشقاوة لسائر الناس. So really taking his gloves off now, he says, you see these so-called sheikhs going around arrogantly amongst people, looking down on people, frowning faces, people, they haven't got the adab of the Prophet, but they're going around as sheikhs, as if they're doing a great favor to people by praying 2 rakats extra, after, or they're praying duha. I'm doing such a great thing, I'm doing such a great favor to people. As if they've been given some sort of freedom. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them some sort of revelation that they're going to be from the people of Jannah and all the other people are going to be from the fire. ثم مع ذلك يلبس لباس المتواضعين من صوف وغيره ويتماوت. So he says, and then at the same time they're wearing all of these, the clothes of the humble people, like wool. So these people who say they're, for example, Sufis, all the turbans and big thobes, big miswaks. As Imam al-Ghazali says in a different book, the longer the beard, the less the taqwa. So it's on this theme of the longer the miswak, the less the taqwa, you could say nowadays. So this is a big problem. This is a huge sickness. You see this type of manifestation of religiosity, but really it's nothing more than they just become manifestations of the same culture that we live in, if you see what I mean. But it's just dressed in that garb. Instead of being dressed in a suit and tie, they're dressed in this uniform of say a sheikh or a Sufi or so on, but they're actually no different to the rest of the people living within this society which breeds arrogance and hasad and greed for the dunya, love for wealth. All of the actions and everything states are the same, just the outward appearance is different. What's the point of that? What's the point of going for Umrah every year? Or for Hajj every year? I mean, for example, I've heard about people going for Hajj every single year. Now that's fine if you have got lots of money and you're giving at least the equivalent amount of money to help poor people that are dying or poor people that need that money. But if you're not giving the same amount of money for poor people, then I don't see how you can justify going for Hajj every year from your money. Because this is like your money has a right upon you. You'll be questioned how you spend your money. You know, should you be spending £2,000 or £3,000 on Hajj and staying in 5-star hotels and all of that, or should that same money be given to people that need that money? You know? Fine if you are giving that money and then you're going for Hajj. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Inshallah, it's a good thing. But this is just the idea of now people, you know, they're taking the deen as another way of just manifesting arrogance, you know, which is then defeating the whole purpose of the deen. You know? So that's what he's saying. وَهَذَا لَا يَلِيقُ بِالتَّرَفُّ وَالْكِبَرُ وَلَا يُلَائِمُ بَلْ يُنَاقِضُ. He said this is not befitting of wearing these type of clothing is not befitting of the inner state of that person of arrogance and looking down on people. This is like incongruent. You know? It's like some of them said, you know, if you want to acquire the dunya, don't do it through the deen. You know, if you want to acquire wealth and all these things, don't do it as by being a sheikh. Do it some other way. At least you don't have to abuse the image of the sheikh. You see what I mean? وَلَكِنَ الْأَعْمَى لَا يُبْصِرُ. He says, however, the blind person cannot see. We finish with this last quite nice story related to this theme. وذكر أن فرقدا الصبرخي دخل على الحسن وعليه كساء وعلى الحسن حلة. One of these people, Farqad, his name was, he came to Al-Hasan al-Basri, one of the great, considered to be the leading student of Sahaba, Al-Hasan al-Basri. This person, Farqad, and also considered to be one of the great people of Tasawwuf and Zuhd. And Farqad, he was wearing a very simple cloth. Whereas Hassan was wearing like hulla is like what you might translate now as a uniform or a suit, like so composed of different things, you know. He was wearing a suit. فَجَعَلَ يَلْمِسُهَا. So this Farqad, he started feeling the suit, the nice suit that Hassan al-Basri was wearing. In other words, you know, sort of trying to give a thing, you know, what's this? Look at my very simple comment here. So Al-Hasan al-Basri says, مَا لَكَ تَنْظُرِ إِلَى ثِيَابِي. So then Al-Hasan al-Basri reversed him. He said, what's your problem, you're looking at my clothes? ثِيَابِي ثِيَابُ أَهْلِ الْجَنَّةِ وَثِيَابُكَ ثِيَابُ أَهْلِ النَّارِ. He says, my clothing is the clothing of the people of Jannah. Your clothing is of the people of fire. So reversed him. بلغني أن أكثر أهل النار أصحاب الأكسية. And then he said to him, it has reached me that most of the people of the fire are the people of this type of cloth that you're wearing. ثم قال الحسن جعلوا الزهد في ثيابهم والكبر في صدورهم. And then Al-Hasan al-Basri went even further and said, not directly to him now, to this person, but he made a general statement, but obviously giving him the message. He said, they. So this is the adab of scholars. They're not going to say to your face, you know, to put you down in front of everyone or something. So he makes this general statement. He says, they make zuhud in their clothing and they put arrogance into their hearts, while arrogance is in their hearts. وَالَّذِي يُحْلَفُ بِهِ لَأَهَدُكُمْ بِكِسَائِهِ أَعْظَمُ كِبَرًا مِنْ صَاحِبِ الْمُطْرَفِ بِمُطْرَفِ. He said, I swear by the one who is sworn, who in whose name oath is taken, one of you with his simple garment is more arrogant than a person who wears a nice shawl. So just showing, that these things, outward appearances can be deceptive, as they say. Actually, let's just finish this, because we just finished the chapter of 1-2 lines. If someone wants to read the poetry, has anyone got the English? You want to try to more?
Noon al-Misri, may Allah bestow His mercy upon him, alluded to this concept when he said, he wished to be a Sufi, so he foolishly took pride in wool, while some folk wear it as a clownish prank, to give you the impression of humility and treat you with arrogant pride. Though arrogant pride bears no resemblance to humility, he wished to be a Sufi so that he would be called trustworthy, though trustworthiness is not what his Sufism signifies. And he is not seeking God through it, but through it he is seeking a path to breach of faith.
Yeah, so just to wind up, then Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah says, فَلْتَحْذُرْ أَيُّهَا الرَّجُلْ مِنْ هَذِهِ الْآفَاتِ الْأَرْبَعَةِ لَا سِيَمَ لِلْكِبَرِ. He says, O person, O man, beware of these 4 tribulations, especially arrogance. فَإِنَّ ثَلَاثَ الْأَوَّلِ. Now I don't know what this word is, مداخ is it, what do you have? مداخ?
مداحف مزالق من دحضت رجله دحضا ودحوضا زلقت. مداحف. مداحف, yeah.
Okay. That's a slippery slope, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, because I've got madakhis or something. So they put the dot in the wrong place or so. لو زللت فيها لوقعت في العصيان. So these are the slippery slopes. The first 3 are the slippery slopes that will take you into disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas arrogance is the worst because it will take you into kufr and tughyan itself. Yeah, well, arrogance. مدحض لو زللت فيه لوقعت في بحار الكفر والطغيان. So this is why arrogance is the worst, because arrogance is the thing that actually veils from the truth. It veils from truth. Whereas the others will lead you into disobedience, arrogance has the potential to lead you into kufr itself. ولا تنسى حديث إبليس وفتنته أنه أبى واستكبر وكان من الكافرين. Don't forget the story of Iblis, when he refused and was arrogant and he became from the kafirin. ورجوع إلى الله سبحانه ورجوع إلى الله سبحانه أن يعصمنا جميعا بحسن نظره إنه الجواد الكريم. And he says, our return and going back is always to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we ask him that he protects us all with his generous gaze. He is the one who is most generous. Jazallahu anna sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ahlu. Jazallahu anna sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ahlu. Jazallahu anna sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ahlu. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.